City of Stevens Point Plan Commission Special Meeting, recorded October 8, 2025.
All right, I have 6 o'clock. We will call the Special Plan Commission meeting of the City of Stevens Point to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yes, you can. Mayor Wiesa.
Here.
Alderperson Kneebone.
Here.
Commissioner Artson.
Here.
Commissioner Beacom.
Here.
Commissioner Moskowiak.
Is excused.
Commissioner Rice.
Here.
Commissioner Schuler.
Here. And we do have a quorum, so we will continue. Item number 1 is a review of the Comprehensive Plan, Chapter 2, Natural, Agricultural, and Cultural Resources and Recommendations to the Common Council. Go ahead.
All right. Sam Wessel, North Central Wisconsin Regional Plan Commission. Welcome to meeting 3 of 7 that we have planned to go through these chapters. So last time we did the first draft of chapters 2 and 4, and we took all the comments and did our best to incorporate them. I got a few more from Lynn Markham, who is online, just minor corrections that we can quick get through. So I just wanted to summarize what the big changes were. So there was discussion last time at the beginning at how we want to address the chapters going forward, and where we seem to land was get to a greater level of detail than what we had in the first chapter. So we did more digging, especially for when we get to chapter 4. I'll get into that a little bit more in terms of where we got some of that data from. But the biggest change you'll notice in chapter 2 is the climate change section, since that's a topic that sometimes people absolutely want it in their comprehensive plan or they don't want to touch it. We went with the approach of going with the state plan that is in place and just using the data from that. So that's probably the biggest section that's been added. And then we shifted things around a little bit to sort of have a better summary at the end of all of the inventory and trends before we get into the issues and moving the issues towards the back of the chapter. So they're next to the goals, objectives, and policies. And then those goals, objectives, and policies are restructured to sort of be a little more organized instead of haphazard like they were before. Those are the big ones I can think of. I don't know if, Chris, I missed any big ones that you want me to draw some attention to.
Yeah, so in Chapter 2, we also made a few additions when it comes to cultural offerings and a few other things. Most notably in page 3 for the section. And then also within issue section regarding well-being and belonging relates to the cultural representation within the community. So if there are any other questions on those, I'd be happy to respond to those questions. We did receive a few comments about some of our missing cultural offerings within the community as well from when the agenda was published, most notably our long-standing Portage County Cultural Festival, our Polish Heritage Society are among organizations, and the organizations that have recently been launching our Latino, Latinx events within our community, as well as our Asian American Heritage Awareness events as well. So
Festival of India.
So there's more for us to add in to make sure that we're being inclusive of the variety of cultures and events that are being celebrated today's day and age, and how that ties into our cultural representation and well-being and belonging in Stevens Point. That was a really large focus of our last strategic plan of People Are the Point, to ensure that people of a variety of backgrounds are being celebrated, acknowledged, and have room within Stevens Point.
So I have written down the comments on that section that you just mentioned, as well as the ones from Lynn. Do you want me to quick just go through all those to see if anyone has any thoughts on them, and then we can go back and address whatever else?
Sure.
All right, so under cultural offerings, this is page 37 of the plan. I think it's probably a different page number in your packet.
It is
It is page 19 in the packet.
Okay.
But page 37 of the plan, so you'll see both those on that page.
So the ones that we added were among American Association of Portage County Incorporated, Polish Heritage Awareness Society, Portage County Cultural Festival, Stevens Point Area Genealogical Society, and then Mayor Wiesa, you just mentioned Festival of India. Okay, I'll write that one down. We can add that. And then there's a suggestion to add a second paragraph under cultural offerings.
One more that just came to mind.
Yeah.
I think it's called AROW. AROW.
AROW.
Native festival at the university every year.
Got it. I'll look it up and make sure I get the correct name or however that spells out. And then there was a suggestion to add another paragraph, and I can just read it off because I wrote it down. And it reads, "It is important to note that many events are hosted annually to celebrate the many cultures present in and around the city of Stevens Point, most notably celebrated at the annual Portage County Cultural Festival in recent years. In recent years, events such as," I'm not going to pronounce it correctly, the Harvest Festival.
Dojinki.
Thank you. Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Hmong Week, Juneteenth, and Hispanic Heritage Awareness Month have been coordinated by a variety of community members, organizations, and institutions to celebrate specific cultures, heritage, and history. These events and others are particularly important to ensure residents of all demographics are represented in the local celebrations and festivities, which may contribute to an increased sense of belonging in the community.
I would add too, since it's coming up Monday, we recognize Indigenous Peoples Day, and November is also Indigenous Peoples Month that we do a proclamation for the city. I'm sure there's more we're missing that speaks to the volumes of cultural activities that we do have.
Yes, there's always one more. And so as you guys, if you stumble upon one that we forgot to mention, just shoot me an email. It doesn't sound like this group would be opposed to me just incorporating that. And then all these chapters we'll get to review at the end one last time too.
Would you include the American Suzuki Institute camp? I mean,
As a cultural,
does bring in,
it brings in people. It's
around
not
the
necessarily
country.
celebrating a culture, though.
yeah, I
It's-
just
it's-
wondered in terms of
I think it should be recognized maybe somewhere in here.
tourism, I don't know.
Tourism or I mean, the fact that.
Don't
I mean,
need to.
It's a pretty big music related.
Yeah, that's usually focused on strings, right? Or is it more than just violin?
Piano,
Yeah.
Okay.
vocal,
Strings,
voice.
Where's
but
their headquarters?
Here.
Is it headquartered in Stevens Point, or is Stevens Point
The
one
American
of?
Suzuki Institute, I'm pretty sure it's
The
here,
Aber
right?
Suzuki Center is here.
But it's the
And
mothership?
They do.
Because if it is, then it belongs in, because
They
it's
do
part
it
of
every
the
year.
cultural foundation of the
50
the
years,
city.
I think they just celebrated.
yeah.
So it's housed at the university.
Right.
So,
So it is here.
yeah, so I think we denoted that within
Brings
the,
in teachers from
um,
other countries.
in that
It
last-
also brings in students from around this country and around the world.
Yeah.
So I just wondered, I don't know.
I think
I'll
it should
look
be
that up.
recognized as part of our diversity. It doesn't specifically recognize a culture per se, but it is headquartered here, and I think it's important to note.
Well, the paragraph itself does talk about Levitamp, and it talks about the symphony,
Okay.
create Festival of the Arts.
And it's a.
Yeah, so maybe it could be listed under there.
It's a lot of
That sounds
dollars
good.
to the city.
Use your best professional judgment.
Yeah.
There you go.
Exactly. We'll just throw it out there.
Yep, I got it written down. Good. Any more on that before I move on to the last few comments from Lynn?
Go ahead.
All right. There weren't that many. Okay, so this one I noticed too. Actually, let's start on page 24. I don't know what the plan, page 24. I don't have the packet ones in front of me. So under, yep, so under climate change, that first paragraph, that last sentence, these trends have resulted in more frequent extreme weather events. She just requested adding, including more intense rainstorms, because it's the inches per hour that's really what we're seeing the uptick in, and that's going to hit infrastructure the hardest. So having that added to that sentence, any opposition to that? All right, and then bottom of 24, just have reduce instead of reducing, because I just have the wrong verb tense. Now going over to table 9 on the next page. The 2050 projection, I would like to add it 2020 through 2050 projection so that it's clear that that is in addition to that increase from the 1950 to 2020. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then on table 10, it is just a 2050 projection. It's not a 2020 through 2050 because it's just measuring what they expect by 2050. Page 27, so the next page over, got to wildlife. Lynn suggested adding fish specifically because walleye and trout will be particularly sensitive to rising temperatures because they're sensitive to the water temperature. So I can add that. And then she brought up wellhead zoning on page 29. So we do talk about wellhead a little bit in, I think, chapter 4 and a little bit in chapter 2 because we're talking about groundwater. It is important to list the wellhead zoning districts and what they do, but my suggestion would be to hold off until the land use chapter because that's when we're talking more from a zoning standpoint, and we could list what the ordinance says. And then there was mention too that Village of Plover and Village of Whiting have their overlay that kind of spills into, like, we're upstream of them. So we should acknowledge that it's kind of on us to be aware of their overlays as well so that their wells are protected, if that makes sense. So I will include all that in chapter 7 unless there's a strong desire to include it here as well. I can just do a quick cross-reference saying, for zoning specifics.
I like the idea of the cross-reference,
Yeah.
simply because it can't be overstated enough.
Yeah, and when people read it, they don't want to think, oh, that's it. There's more in a future chapter. So I'll do the cross-reference then and say, for zoning specifics, see the land use chapter. All right, that might be it. Oh, there's a few more. Are we aware if the forestry department has a canopy cover map for the tree canopy? That was a suggested inclusion, but I don't know if one
Say
exists.
canopy map. We've got all the city trees in the right-of-way are like on a GIS overlay. But when you're talking canopy, are you looking at like percentage of coverage?
I think so. That's the impression I got, so.
I have to check with the city forester on
Okay.
that, but I certainly wouldn't put it past him because he is above and beyond what anybody else would do.
Cool. And that's something we can easily drag and drop in.
Make a note to check with Todd on that.
And then finally, I think this is the last one. I'm going to double check. So on the plan, page 33, we talk about the Portage County Seed Bank. Just adding another sentence saying they provide the native plant seeds at public libraries and then list them off, which would be Stevens Point, Rosscholtz, Almond, Plover, and Amherst.
Good.
I think that is it. I should mention too, in the goals, objectives, and policies, Chris helped quite a bit on reorganizing them into just a more logical format where you see them, they kind of follow like a, not bibliography, a bulleted list where they're grouped by similarity, where the objectives and policies are underneath the goal that they're related to. And so the stuff that's in highlighter in your packets is stuff that was added, I think, per Chris's suggestion, unless he got it from somewhere else.
Yeah, so in what was sent last week was the highlighted version, so all of the changes that were discussed in Plan Commission at our last meeting in August, all of the changes that were discussed and referenced were highlighted and identified for you all. That wasn't included in the public packets. So those were sent directly to you all for reference.
Oh, I don't know if I saw it.
Okay.
Yeah, hence my question.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
apologies that if that was missed. I can resend that and make sure it's in your inbox, so that way all of the changes that were made between
That would be
the last
super helpful.
meeting.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. All the changes that were made between the last meeting and now, again, are identified and pulled out, so that way if there are any questions about that, they can be referenced. But the goals, objectives, and policies, there were a few additions in order to address some of the topics that we had discussed at last month's meeting. So those were new additions. But for the most part, all of the goals, objectives, and policies that were included before remained, except maybe one strike through.
Yeah, if they are not highlighted, they're from before, they just might be shifted around in terms of where they were location-wise. And two quick comments before I forget, because they're up on the screen. I did add more about the sustainability information and the work that's done so far with the resolution and that sort of thing. And then Agriculturally, we didn't have a whole lot of content the last time that was specific to the city. It was more the county-wide context, but we added more about community gardens and sort of urban agriculture and the infrastructure that's in place. So I wanted to point that out too.
Okay. Does anybody else have comments regarding Chapter 2? Let's start on that end.
Nope. Okay. I really like the way that the work has been with the stuff that was added to the chapter. I think that makes, well, it helped the previously identified issues make a lot more sense because now they have some sort of a foundation. And the additions were good. I know last time we really didn't have a chance to talk about the goals, objectives, and policies other than it was, I guess, just a compilation of stuff from subsequent planning, right? And I guess my question based on that, and we can talk about some of the details that are in the proposed language now. I was wondering why the original goals, objectives, and policies were kind of disregarded and basically starting over. Because you had an adopted set that were fairly straightforward and in some places more specific. And I guess this is for all the chapters, because this is really the second chapter we've had a chance to focus in on the details of the end of the chapter, right? And my comment will go through the subsequent chapters that we'll be going through. What we had in place, it was not just old, but it was, I think, very adequate and very well thought out. And I don't fully like the fact that that's just gone and other stuff is trying to come in its place, in part from a bunch of subsequent conversations. I guess in my mind when we started this, I was thinking a really good way to do that is just try to validate or verify the gaps that were in place and make sure that anything that's been mentioned subsequently is covered by those gaps. I mean, the nature of the planning is the neighborhood plans should be implementing, reacting, and based on overarching city ideas, right? I mean, that's kind of the way it works. You got the big plan, then the neighborhoods try to do the best they can with that. And if they bring something new, it's a great time to bring it in. I mean, because we're doing this kind of a hybrid, right? You've got some existing secondary planning coming into this primary planning. So I guess my question is it possible to, or can it be explained why the initial, in all of these subsequent chapters, the initial goals, objectives, and policies were just considered to be something that you just have to redo?
Yeah, I can explain how I got to these. So this is a little different of an approach. You're right. Typically, when you do a full rewrite, you would start with the existing ones that were adopted back then. The main reason why they shifted so much is what I did at the way beginning is I lined those up next to all the neighborhood planning efforts that had been done, which had quite a few goals, objectives, and policies within those as well. And when I lined all of them up, and then I looked at how many goals, objectives, and policies seemed to be in multiple places in the old plan, it started to look very duplicative, which isn't a bad thing. I just didn't want to give you guys hundreds of things to have to sort through, so I did my best to just consolidate them down. I tried to make it streamlined just because my understanding is the whole reason the city reached out to us was because there was sort of a desire of, we've done all this planning, we just need it in one place. So that was my attempt at sort of making it more compact. Certainly, is it possible that I left out some important details? Possibly. I tried to hit them all, but that's not to say that there might be ideas that could be worked back in. We could also maybe do a side-by-side of these related to the original ones from 2005, and then between now and the next meeting, everyone can sort of compare the two and then come back. So that's sort of the background and possible solutions.
Well, and I'd be very interested in seeing the Ag, Natural, and Cultural Resources conclusions that went with that, because I think specifically in the ANCR chapter, there's some very specific relating of natural resources and agriculture and culture to what the city feels about it, right? And certainly the new stuff does, but it's way more generalized. And that's part of where my disconnect is, because I'm thinking that, in places, the baby's going out with the bathwater. And I was kind of sad about that. And I'm only one voice, and whatever this group agrees on, all the new stuff could be great. I just know that I wouldn't want the default position just to be to ditch the old stuff and try to come up with something that sort of fills in the same blanks but becomes a little more generalized and a little less specific. That's my concern.
Makes sense, yeah.
Anything else, Commissioner?
No, thanks.
Okay, we'll go back to Commissioner Arnson then.
I guess just kind of spinning off of that, and Jeff, I'm not sure if this is what you're getting at, but did we want to try to show how those earlier goals and et cetera had been addressed, kind of achieved in the past 20 years or so? Or just lifting, no need to brag about our successes, just presenting the challenges again?
Well, they're written in such a way where they're kind of general directives, so you could do a tote board, I guess, but I think it varies with the chapter, but I've always been curious about that, how staff and the council felt about what the accomplishments of the previous plan have been, right? And how does this take us to the next step or keep us moving in the direction that we liked?
But is that something we want to highlight in the plan?
No.
Like where we've been? Maybe a report of, these are the things that we've accomplished
I
since
think
the last
so.
plan, but I don't think it's necessary to put them in the next version of this.
Just the bottom line is, how did some of these stuff some of the things that get removed no longer pertain when a lot of them seem like they did and were good ideas? Again, they're not the only good ideas, but they're being replaced, and that's my question is, I want this group and the council to be sure that, okay, we're getting a very good, all-inclusive take on how we really think things should go. And we had a standing set of things, and changing for the sake of change, not great, but as long as the concepts and the ideas translate. Because I think through the housing study, which we'll talk about 2 chapters from now tonight, interesting, and it would be great if we had a presentation on that just to understand I'm not saying we need one tonight, but a lot of the housing chapter is going to be based on work that was done in this energy plan. And so I think we could all benefit from a little more detail on that at some point. Anyway, that's enough for me for right now.
Commissioner Beacom.
Just a point to make. So page 41 of the plan, 4th bullet, I would suggest pulling that out of that section. So that's Conservation Reserve Program. It says an agency within NRCS. It's on equal footing with NRCS. So they're both agencies within USDA's FPAC. So the rest of these, you've got a list of NRCS programs, and that's an FSA program. Most of the programs are housed in NRCS, but FSA has a few. So that may just be another.
Yeah, I found an updated list that was more robust than the one I had before, and I figured I'm just going to throw it all in there, and then you can decide how.
Okay.
It's also tricky because it's like how many would apply to a city situation versus outside of town.
RCPP is a big program, but that is multi-partners, not landowner specific, might engage landowners, but some of these, the landowner works direct with the agency and the local cooperator. Some of these are bigger efforts involving multi-jurisdictional partners. But FSA, that CRP is kind of a square peg in that list.
Okay. I'll rework it.
Anything else, Commissioner?
Nope.
Okay, Alderperson Kneebone.
On page 34 of the plan, under agricultural resources, it talks about, additionally, in the middle of the paragraph, city allows residents to have chickens, ducks, and/or rabbits. We also allow beehives. So you might want to add bees.
What page is this?
It's Page 34 of the plan, page 16 of 59 in the chapter that says paragraph of agricultural resources. About the middle of the paragraph, this is a sentence, additionally, the city allows residents to have chickens, hens only, ducks, and/or rabbits, indicating that city residents have an interest in raising farm products on a small scale. We also allow beehives.
You got it.
So,
So, and I would add, you can wordsmith it however you want. Those are allowed by ordinance. Anything else could be allowed with conditional use.
Okay.
And we've had horses, a pig,
goats, baby goats.
I don't remember if we had any goats or not. But those are, so the rabbits, chickens, ducks, bees, those are allowed by ordinance. Anything outside of that could be allowed via conditional use.
That's important. I'll put that in there.
Right, so it's not like everything else is banned.
Right.
There was a pig on the north side for a long time, and I don't think there's anybody here that remembers Percy, the miniature therapy horse. That's sad that people are going to forget about Percy. It's a story for another day, but it was a big deal back when I was on council.
I remember someone bringing forward a request to keep a therapy monkey, and I think we voted no.
Mary McComb told us a story about getting attacked by a monkey, yes. So bottom line is, yeah, anything else could be conditional use.
In a previous
That's important to note, too.
Yeah. In a previous role, I got asked about otters.
Otters?
And I had to research and.
It's a thing,
Yeah.
right?
I think it's a social media trend, so. Doesn't sound like a great idea, though.
Otters.
I never had one.
So I think before we move on to the next chapter, I do want to get at what Jeff was mentioning with the goals, objectives, and policies, and I think we should have sort of an expectation set for next time on what I need to do. So I did look them over at some point, and I guess to me it's not as obvious what's missing because I wasn't there the first time around, so I think it's probably going to be mostly a level of detail difference between the two. So I don't know if someone wants to just compare the two side by side. I don't know. Do you have an idea?
I think what staff can do for the following chapters is to provide the draft chapter, the goals, objectives, and policies that have been outlined by me and Sam, and then include the previous goals, objectives, and policies from the chapter from the 2005 adopted plan, and we can identify those that are not being addressed by the goals and objectives and policies that we've drafted based on public input this time around.
Would it be easier just to start with the old ones and then replace those with the new ones you think need changing?
Well, we don't want to throw all the planning work that's been done with those neighborhood plans, and that's where.
But it can't be injected verbatim into this plan because it'll be crazy. Plus, there's going to be 6 other neighborhood plans, and do you go back and revise the comprehensive plan?
I suppose what I'm acknowledging is that Sam did reference the previous goals, objectives, and policies and tried to consolidate.
Yeah, I think what we'll probably find is that it's a level of detail issue between what we have here and what we had in the previous one, more than maybe there's a few that I just completely miss. I make mistakes. So I think it's important to just do a good once over and make sure everything we want is incorporated by comparing them side to side.
Yeah.
And then with those conclusions you mentioned too, maybe I can bring a little more of that into how we talked about beefing up the end of the chapters and have a nice summary before we get into.
Take a look at those, because there's some very kind of prescriptive things about where development could, should, not happen.
Yep.
And I think they're very important for people to be able to see that and say, okay, they thought about that. This is why they said it can't go there. This is why. And that's a thread through the chapters, and this one's based on natural resources, right? Whether it be soils, whether it be environmental areas, whatever.
And I suspect too, I could have possibly taken some of that and pushed it to chapter 7 when I was going through all of them at the way beginning. So we might run into that stuff later as well, but we want to make sure that it's all in there for sure.
Before we scoot to the next chapter, I do have a couple questions about the actual GOPs that are proposed tonight.
Sure.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Give her Yazda, as they say.
Okay, policy number 1 under goal 1, objective 1. It says enforce agricultural preservation. The city doesn't have any way to do that. It doesn't have anything to enforce. Like the county has a thin version of what ag preservation might be, but the city doesn't have anything. So that just the word ensure with that phrase is just there's no way for the city to do it.
Right, yeah, we can throw that one out. Not the whole thing, but just, I'll cross off agricultural preservation.
Same thing kind of with objective 2 under the same goal. It says protect economically valuable natural resources like agricultural lands and woodlands while encouraging neighborhood scale. I think in part of the plan, or at least the old plan, the acknowledgement is made, well, we really don't have any ag land, right?
How about the ETZ, or you guys don't do zoning, you do platting, extraterritorial.
Oh, you're talking about, actually, yeah, but that's not the city land, right?
Well,
It's future
to
city
be fair,
land.
we
Yeah.
do lease city-owned land for agriculture. The stuff off of Old 18 is leased to a farmer, and the stuff out on Highway 10 East near Parkdale Park is leased. I don't know that it actually cuts hay on it, though.
I don't think you're looking to protect it in perpetuity, though.
No.
It's a community beneficial use.
Yeah, till we
While it's
find something
in
else.
holding.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, that sort of implies
Yeah.
a more strict take on it.
Yeah, I always see that in terms of this is how you protect yourself from getting landlocked by sprawl.
Yeah.
So I'll work with the wording on that one. That was
Objective 2, middle of the page, under goal 1.
Got it. All right.
So goal 2, objective 2, with the policies 1, 2, 3, that's all like related to parks. And I guess it's got some usefulness in this chapter because this chapter does get at parks a bit, but more under certainly utilities, community facilities than it does under ag natural resources.
And the parks, I've got state statute in front of me too. I think they mention parks in both chapters in the state statute, so it's like, how much do I mention and where of each?
Primary though in
the developed stuff
in
for
the
sure.
UCF, yeah.
All right.
Other than that, it's just my original comments. Other than that, it's just my original comments.
Oh, good. Cool. All right. Chris, are you looking for a recommendation to council on this?
I guess, given the number of topics discussed tonight and the need to cross-reference the goals, objectives, and policies from the 2005 plan, we'll hold off on making a recommendation.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if we wanted to take action on it with the proposed changes or just bring it back for one more final review, but we'll bring it back again. Okay, that's it on chapter 2, yes? Item number 2 is the review of chapter 4.
All right. So this was tricky. Jeff, I think you mentioned last time, read back through the old one, and a lot of the old one pulls from the Stevens Point Master Utility Plan, I think it was called.
Utility Master Plan.
Yeah, but no such updated document exists to our knowledge that would have the same kind of content. So I pulled more heavily from that sewer service area plan that was recently done.
You can badmouth him, he's not here.
Because in statute, the big thing is they want to look for a capacity of facilities, and that's a hard thing, harder and harder to come by, I feel like, in newer plans, just because there are other departments that haven't updated their plans or more stuff has become confidential. I know like a lot of utility stuff has become more confidential through the years because of safety and whatnot. So I did my best to add more content related to capacities and of the different facilities, but unfortunately we don't have a plan as robust as the one in 2005 to draw from. So what else? We had edits from the previous meeting. We added solar energy, healthcare, park rec facilities, because the healthcare addresses and clinics needed to be fixed a little bit. And then the parks, I found an updated map that had all the newer ones, so I added the ones that were missing. Public health information, that gets more at the public health planning that the county does. Just for reference, I can't remember who brought that up the last time. And then same with goals, objectives, and policies. You're probably Once we get that figured out with this new approach we're going to take, I think that stuff will get easier too as we go through the plan. So
Okay.
that's pretty much it.
Comments? We'll start on that end again. So,
Just a couple. Page 69, the very beginning background paragraph, sanitary sewer is not mentioned, but on-site wastewater recycling facilities are. Where you get sort of like the shotgun of stuff. Yeah, sanitary sewer's not on there.
Got it.
I guess I'll go to page 73. The very first paragraph, last line, 230,000 what?
I think homes.
Okay.
I got so excited to finish the sentence, I forgot to add the last word.
Planners get paid by the word, though, so I just think you don't want to ignore those. Page 74, the jails paragraph. I think the county jail is going to be built in Plover, and so...
This keeps changing. What is the latest?
the latest is the county has purchased property in Plover
Okay.
for the use of building a jail and law enforcement center, but not a juvenile detention facility. But none of the funding or the design has been approved yet. But the goal is to have the facility built out there.
All right.
And also in that paragraph, it sort of casually mentions that the city is vacating the courthouse, and I was wondering why that wasn't maybe explained more fully on page 70, when the first category out of the gate is kind of like the city hall. The comp plan is an ideal place to lay out space needs and rationale for decisions on future facilities. And, I know there's been a lot of studies and a lot of discussion by the city about what should go where and how it should go. And the comp plan has always been the ideal place as a repository of that information. I'm not sure how much the council is interested in putting in there, but in an ideal world, that's where the city would make its case for how it considers its campus to be important, the type of thing it would be there, and the type of things they need to do going forward to either fulfill that campus or redirect in other areas. Granted, it's not supposed to be a construction plan, but just in terms of the philosophy, where the city's coming from on how it wants to deal with its buildings, that's a spot for it. And I just was wondering if, like, not an afterthought, but a sort of a later in the chapter telling of it.
Yeah, so we added to the issues, and that's where a lot of those details are. And that came after last meeting, so I think we just need to beef up on the front end so that it's not a surprise when you get to the issues.
People might think, oh, there's a conclusion that was really never discussed, and they're just concluding.
Yeah, we'll beef this up earlier in the chapter. Chris, did you have something?
No, I was just going to make the same statement that you did.
Yeah.
We discussed it on page 79, but we should absolutely provide more detail there.
On page 76, the green circle is not a state trail, correct?
Actually listed on the DNR, it is a state trail.
It is.
But as a state trail, but they say you don't need a state pass to go on it. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay. And nowhere on the green circle site do they ever talk about being a state trail?
Right.
Okay.
That was a more recent thing that surprised me too when I'm like, why is this on here?
Okay. And then Highway 10 is a U.S. highway, not a state highway.
Oh, yep. I'll do a keyword search to make sure all of those are.
Let's see, page 79. The last line of the renewable energy paragraph. I don't know, sounds like me at bar time. There are concerns over the location of these facilities and the potential to embracing smaller scale renewable energy opportunities that directly benefit energy customers. There's something in the middle there that's kind of an oops, I think.
Oh, it should probably be, and there is potential, or split it into two sentences because they're kind of two random thoughts put together.
I do that all the time.
The concept makes sense though, right? When I mention smaller scale, this is just something we've run into. Like we did a comp plan in Saratoga where they've got big solar farms and people might be pro solar, but for more of a like, I would like to, put some on my roof to make my bill go down versus I don't necessarily want a sea of solar panels in my backyard. And that seems to be where the tension tends to fall regarding that topic. And of course, results vary too. So I just want to make sure I'm explaining it in a way that makes sense.
Well, the voice kind of changes throughout where it's mentioned. I think in one, maybe the first mentions it, it's kind of an ominous thing, the solar farms and their detriment to land use and something else. But then they're portrayed in kind of a more generally positive light later. So I'll just give an eye to that and see if that makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of that when we did the Portage County plan, a lot of people kept saying like, I'm not necessarily against solar, it's just we don't want to get landlocked with, like Village of Plover especially, they don't want to get landlocked so that's why there is kind of that like, not 100% for, not 100% against, we got to pick somewhere in between. Cool.
Anything else, Commissioner Schuler?
I don't. I apologize for that.
Anyone else? On Chapter 4.
Oh, I have a comment, and I don't know that this is necessary or not. On page 70, under Inventory and Trends, City Government, you mention all the departments, including the airport and Public Works. And then you have the Streets Department facility on 6th Avenue, Community Media, Police Department and their address, the address of the fire, transit, Public Utilities Campus, but you don't mention where the airport is. I don't know if you need to put an address for the airport or not.
Should make a general reference to where it is. A lot of this stuff makes it on the maps, but we just haven't seen the maps yet, so.
Sure.
That comes into play too, but I'll make a reference to.
It's going to be Highway 66.
Again, I don't know if that's something that's necessary.
It might not be Highway 66. I don't know the address of the airport, but once you get on airport property, the areas are named. I don't know if they're official street map things, but I think it'd be a good idea to put some sort of reference in there.
Say on the northeast or whatever. There's a word missing on page 74. Talking about the city uses an automatic aid agreement. Let's see.
It'd be under fire.
Under fire.
Yeah, it uses an automatic aid agreement.
The city uses an automatic aid agreement. The Plover, Hull, and Rudolph fire departments, I think needs to be in there.
Yep. And
an automatic aid agreement with the Plover.
Are we sure about Rudolph? I'll
double check.
Yeah, I don't think our mutual aid.
My guess is
they're part of Mabus. Everybody's part of Mabus.
Would they come here?
But what we have is a mutual aid agreement with Hull and Plover. For structure fires, we all respond.
Yeah.
Wherever it is. I don't think that applies with Rudolph.
I'll double check with JP.
Yeah.
And another thing too I want to mention, someone asked the last time, is it the Village of Plover, is it the Town of Plover? When I look them up, it just says Plover Fire
Village.
Department. Okay, so I can put Village, it's just officially none of them call themselves by their whatever.
It's the Village of Plover Fire Department.
And then Town of Hall.
Correct.
And then Rudolph, I'm assuming Village, because there's a village and a town.
Probably. But again, I don't think Rudolph is part of it.
Right, we'll find out.
Double check. Anything else? Anyone else in Chapter 4? All right, do we feel confident to make a recommendation to council on this one, or do we want to bring that back one more time? There were a lot less changes on this.
I think it's still going to go through a GOP review.
Yeah, I agree that we should probably hold off until we get those
Fair enough.
goals, objectives, and policies nailed down.
Good.
You know, and I'm not trying to make extra work, but I think at some point somebody will say, well, what was wrong with the old ones? Why aren't, you know what I mean? So it's good to be able to at least address why. Change is good, just so we can make sure that people know why.
You'd be one to ask.
Right? All right, well, then we're going to move on to item number 3, which is a review of the Chapter 3.
All right, so I'll give a quick intro before we dive into the text itself. So right off the bat, the biggest thing you'll probably notice, if there's a typical state statute stuff about age, condition, type of housing, prices, that sort of thing, values. When we get to this ability to afford analysis, so we recently did a 5-county study for Synergy, which I wrote. Angel Laidlaw is the CEO. She hired us to do that. There was this ability to afford analysis, which it's not perfect because, certainly people who bought their house 25 years ago are paying just a tiny fraction of their income towards their housing costs versus someone buying their house today. But it's a good idea to just lay out how does the values distribute relative to the incomes, and that's what that's getting at. We typically don't do that in comp plans because it's a massive time-consuming spreadsheet thing we got to do, but since Synergy had already done it and we could just pull the data out of there for Portage County specifically, Chris requested that we throw that in there just for reference. And I just want to make sure everyone understands how the methodology behind it works. We basically just took 30% of your income spent on housing is sort of the standard for affordable according to HUD. We took that, and it's not perfect, but given the census categories you can get data from, we lined them up as best as we could in that table 20 to show, okay, if you make this much, you could probably afford, to rent this much or to purchase this much. And then the following graphs have that distribution so you can see where the housing gaps are. And it is common for us to see pronounced shortages on the very lowest income levels because there's just very few units that are that affordable anymore, but also on the high end where you have people making, 6 figures or more, a big shortage of higher end housing. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean if someone makes that much money, they automatically want to upgrade into something nice, but you can have a situation where higher earners would upgrade, but then they don't because that product doesn't exist. So then that more affordable product they're currently in doesn't get freed up for the next person in line whose budget isn't as high. So that's sort of the concept that those get at. And I just want to make sure it was understandable because it's something that if you don't do it every day, it can be a, heavy lift.
I mean, it's understandable. I think it's good to put that in for reference. 7% I wouldn't say is necessarily a high rate, but it's not 7% today.
Right.
It's already at 6.
When I did this, it was 7, then yeah.
Sure. So you kind of did it at the worst case scenario. It's not going to get to 2.5, but I don't suspect it'll stay at 7 for long. Why 10%?
Again, it's like we have to capture some sort of, we have to start somewhere, and that's where the imperfection lies. Sometimes people say the average, like when I did Adams County, I think they said their average down payment's closer to 6%. It varies from county to county, and you kind of have to ask realtors or lenders, like, what are you seeing people put down?
But this is driving at affordability, and the people at the bottom of this scale are doing 5%.
Right.
I mean, they're under programs. So the people doing 10% more can afford to throw more at it. So that's the one that I think skews the data a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. It's hard to do it consistently across all incomes with like a variable down payment because then it just gets sloppier and harder to communicate. So again, it's more of a visual communication where you can see how the two categories align rather than everyone's falling into the situation because credit scores vary, equity varies, down payment varies. But yeah, I agree. If you want, I can put more of that like disclaimer type language in there.
Yeah, put something like that in there that, programs vary with required down payments and interest rates are expected to go down.
And then when we adopt it a year from now, will they go back up?
Will they go back up? Right.
That's the fun part about these plans is stuff that changes while you're doing it.
As long as we're lingering around that table, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
On page 55, at the very bottom paragraph under the table, you introduced for the first time the city's median family income, which is substantially higher than the median household income. And then on table 20, you talk about based on income, but you just talked about median family income, haven't really differentiated, and that table isn't labeled whether it's median household income you're talking about, which it is,
Yep.
or the other. And I guess if there's a way just to say that, yes, this is median household income, so people can do the math themselves if they want.
Yes.
On table 20, Jeff?
Yeah, because on the bottom of
Yep.
the previous page, we introduced, pardon me, I'm not accusing.
Right, but but it lists the income range on the table.
I just wrote income. I should write median household income so people know what I mean
Correct.
by income.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to clarify too, the median family income on the previous page, so,
But it's not, your table isn't based on median income.
correct, it's based on household income. I
No,
need
it's
the
just
word,
based on income.
but there's a difference. I use household income per how census defines it, so I do think it's important to put
I see
household.
what you're saying there.
You got to
Okay.
maintain the data source all the way
Yeah.
through.
Right.
Because a person who doesn't read stuff like this every day might think, oh, my own paycheck, even if their spouse works, or, it's just
Right.
easiest to clarify exactly which.
So household income, but nothing, whether
Right.
it's median, family, or
And that paragraph before where I mentioned family, I usually don't bring up family income. It's not typically a standard that's used because it excludes certain parts of the population, but I thought it was worth mentioning the gap because you have so many college-age people and more, single-person households who wouldn't be lumped in with family, that it,
yeah, that makes sense.
So it is $30,000 more.
yeah.
And people will see that and go, well, but family. So I was a little confused by it. The paragraph helps, but it was like, there you go.
Yeah, I will work on the wording to communicate that a little better.
Like figures 7, 8, and 9, the axes aren't labeled, and you can sort of infer if you read table 20 that,
What page you on, Jeff?
it's following 56 and 57 and 58. So starting under the table that we're just talking about,
Okay.
it starts to break down the households and the units. And you can sort of guess across the bottom that that's housing values that we're talking about, but
Yep.
it's not labeled.
I'll label it, yeah.
And then even it's kind of easy to infer that the grades up the left-hand side are the actual number of units.
And it's tricky because it's double duty where it's households, but also housing units.
Yeah.
So I'll figure out how to do that.
U-holds.
Okay.
That was just something where I could see what it was, but I think a lot of
Yes.
people, if they're going to read it, they're going to just sort of scramble to find out exactly what the context is for that.
Yep. And when I do this every day, I forget that, so.
But I do have, I guess, a question related to the actual bars themselves.
Sure.
So, the gaps have been identified, and I guess one of the questions is going to be, what should the city's approach to them be? And do we, generically speaking, does the city want to eliminate the gaps? Do you want to reduce them? What's the optimal, ideal look that we should see? What does reality look like if the higher income folks who don't have the units available to them that they would normally be able to buy, that they crowd back? I guess this doesn't show the crowding, it shows the possibility for crowding, right? And then, I guess, what do we want the bars to look like in the end? Because that seems like a policy point right there. This is what we got, we need to fix it.
Yeah, this is always tricky because people always want to know exactly how many units of what prices to build. And it's like, well, there's no way to really know what people's individual actions will be once more units come online. If a new 1,600 square foot house is $400,000 and you have a house that's twice as big that you already paid off, it's like, well, that doesn't make sense to upgrade into something that's smaller. Additionally, developers are only building specific limited things based on what things cost, their margins, that sort of thing. So it's like, well, ideally everyone would have their perfect housing situation, but the key is really expanding supply to enhance, how many options there are and to reduce that upward creep of prices over time because it sort of moderates itself. So I'm open to ideas,
I know it's impossible, right?
It is, yep.
And so I guess the task becomes, is there a way in the text? And I think the text eventually does do a good job of saying, okay, these are the things we need to do to try to create an environment where this evens out more.
Yep.
Where these people have the opportunity they need and these people can, expand into whatever type of housing that they currently can't now. As you look at it, if there's a way to more kind of overtly say that these are the type of things that can, if the bar graph is the problem, then the things we're talking about next are the kind of the things that really, I don't remember it kind of poking out as saying, this is how you're going to address that.
Yeah.
And that's not really what it is. But if there's a way to say, okay, this is what the city really needs to do. As you look at it again, if there's a way to put a finer point on it,
Yeah.
without saying that this is the magic bullet, because there's no such thing.
Right. Yeah, my twofold approach, especially when we did the synergy one, it's like, on one hand, I mentioned that, building the nicer homes to get people to shuffle the deck, but that doesn't mean, the lowest income brackets are maybe not going to notice that big of a difference. That stuff is super important too, but it usually requires a bunch of subsidies, which are more difficult to line up when you're, you have a foundation over here and you have a tax credit over here and you're trying to make it work, you're trying to get approved. So it really is sort of, my twofold approach is usually try to build a variety, but also focus on, if you do middle class housing, even when it looks like there's enough housing for the middle incomes, it still frees up supply because people with higher incomes can still afford that, whereas the people below can't always qualify for higher end housing, if that makes sense. So that's a lot, but...
You RPC guys aren't getting me out of my house with a cheap mortgage. That's all I'm saying right now.
Yeah,
No matter what you try, I'm staying.
I bought in 2021. I'm not going to go anywhere.
Thank you, Christy.
Commissioner Hartson.
Could we step back a little bit and explain this table to me a little bit? I'm a little bit puzzled by it, the owner household versus the owner occupied units. I'm not entirely clear what those are, and are these, if we add up all these houses here, is that the total housing that's available, and this include houses and like all apartments and duplexes and everything? Could you?
Yes, so it goes by owner
Assume
versus...
I'm a dummy.
Yeah, owner versus renter occupied. So figure 7 is anything you can purchase. Figure 8 is anything you can rent. And then figure 9 is all of them together so you can just see what the whole spectrum looks like. And then how we get them into those individual prices, it's just going by table 20. It's how many households earn enough to afford that category based on table 20. So if we do like a scenario, figure 7, if you make $50,000, you can afford, that rent that starts at $1,250, or a purchase price that starts at $150,000 based on these terms. So that household would fall into that bucket, and it lines it up next to, well, how many housing units are there available to that household? And I should mention too that only the households who are currently owning or renting are included in their respective tables, but all households together are included in that final table. So you can see the distribution in different ways, because there's people who currently rent who want to own. There might be someone who wants to downsize into a rental in their retirement years, but the data doesn't tell us who wants to do what, so it's important to do individually and then all together.
Commissioner, did that clear things up a little bit or not?
A little bit. I'll work through it.
Okay. Commissioner Beacom.
A few things. I don't know that I buy the idea that more expensive units moves people up the ladder. I think to your point before, there's a lot of factors going on. So more middle-income housing helps because, like Jeff said, this is one of our biggest challenges. The older folks in town aren't moving out of their homes because we don't have the type of housing that they're interested in moving into. So I see that more as a type than an income class. Plus, This stuff all got inflated in the last 5 to 10 years, and that's problematic too, because of, like you said, somebody that wants to transition out of a house, they own something, and what they can get brand new doesn't compare to what they're in.
Right.
So I feel like that's a challenge, just in general. One question, I guess, to ask you is, when you're looking at affordability, how do you factor choice? Like somebody making a choice on what they're going to buy and what they need versus what they can afford.
That's the challenge. Census data doesn't tell us people's consumer behaviors. So, some people are extremely frugal and they love to, save and save.
Fewer of those people today than 20 years ago.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think we see a trend where people buy what they want and can't afford it, and people spend more money on things that they want and then not have money for what they need. And I do think that that's a factor in a lot of this, and whether we can track that or not, I don't know, but it's certainly relevant.
And on the other hand, too, construction costs mean that the purchase prices are only going to go so low compared to in the past. So that's the other part of it, too. So like you said, I'm not someone who's like, everyone needs to build high-end housing and go all out. That stuff, people who are going to buy that housing can afford to just make it happen on their own a lot of the time, or they'll build out in the country. You don't necessarily need to recruit that product as much as you need to get to know your developers who are willing to build the stuff that average people can afford, or people towards the middle. And people who are in the lower income housing units, they might be working their way up too, and they want some more middle class stuff too. So that's why it's one of those where if you do a lot in the middle, people who earn more can still qualify down, and people who are trying to work their way up now have something to move into. But again, there's so much variability in terms of people's preferences and how they manage their money and whatever. But the big price inflation, study after study, points back to supply versus demand for the bulk of that. I mean, there's other factors at play too. So expanding the supply and expanding the variety seems to be the way to go for all these studies that I've read.
Well, I think Point had a sharper curve. I think that there was a lot of value here, and then we caught up to other people in the last 10 years. I mean, you could buy a duplex for $100,000 less than a decade ago.
Yep.
Same duplex is probably double that now. So I think for us, we maybe felt it a little bit more than some of the others.
Yes. When I first moved down to Madison, it was like already expensive 10 to 15 years ago, but not the same for a lot of, farther away places in Wisconsin. So I do agree with that. It was faster and all at once kind of the way that things inflated here.
I've got other things if you want me to continue.
Go on.
So page 49, table 11, we do see big growth from 90 to 2000, 2000 to 2010, and then it slows 2010 to 2020. And maybe I missed it, but you don't put in there kind of the housing crisis of 2008, 2009, which really slowed home building across the board. I don't know if it was just Point that slowed so much as that was national.
Yeah, and a lot of sort of local developers folded, like family builders, and now you've got more of the bigger firms, and that affects things too. So I'll bring up a little tidbit about the housing bubble and how that affected things.
On the next page, I'm glad that you mentioned in building age, while some older homes are built with sturdier materials than new construction. I think on Monday, Jeff made the point, something like all housing is important housing. I do think that that's an important part in this report or in this chapter, which is sometimes we look down on the older stock or it's just not as pretty, but the reality is that's where you get your affordable, is your stock that ages out. And, you look at what's built from pre-50, that's probably going to be here longer than stuff that got built in the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. It can get past its livable age, and the city is incentivized to get rid of it, but most of that has stronger bones, and it's built to last, and it does support our affordable housing model. Also to that, in terms of the age of our stock, that is a big part to do with zoning and the work that Adam's done. That has prevented us to refresh our stock more than any other factor. Mm-hmm. Let's see what else. 59. I'll just make a point, affordability and availability, the third line, in 2023, only 9.5% of city residents were satisfied with housing affordability. I'm surprised you found 9.5%. Nobody ever says they're not paying enough for their rent or their mortgage. So you don't expect people to, you don't expect that number. And I think for now, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that, just to clarify, that was a countywide survey, but I was able to filter the respondents who lived in the city of Stevens Point based on how we had it set up. So that's where
Well,
that
and
came
like
from.
any other survey, you're more likely to get respondents that have an axe to grind too. I mean, that's the other thing. So I take that with a grain of salt. The tables you have in the front are more telling. Income versus cost determine where we rank in affordability versus comparable cities.
Any other comments in chapter 4? Sorry, chapter 3. I knew that was wrong.
Actually, I do want to come back to something on that same page 59. Middle of that page, vacancy rates and homeownership rates are continuing to fall. Are homeownership rates so much continuing to fall, or did we just build a whole bunch of rental stock over that period? So we inflated that side of the market without seeing the transfer because we don't have people moving out of their homes.
It's probably a little bit of both. I know I should look into Stevens Point specifically, but a lot of places after 2008, a lot of single-family homes got bought up and converted to rentals. I used to work for City of River Falls, which is a little bit smaller than here in a college town, and that was a big transition that happened around that time too, where more the urban core, a lot of stuff flipped to rental to the point where I think it was over 50% was rental. So I think I suspect it's a little bit of both, where more has been built, but also more has been converted. I don't think it's any one overriding the other, but we can try to think of where we might be able to get some of that information.
Well, and the 50-50 is pretty standard for the UW system towns.
Yep.
So in that case, that's our comp, not Rapids or something else. You know, how do we rank in our percentage of owner-occupied versus rental with schools?
If you want, I can add a quick table that just shows like owner occupancy rates and median values, and then median household incomes for like, we could do Point, Rapids, Marshfield, Wausau, or something like that. Or we could do Point versus other college towns around the state. I don't know which you would prefer.
I think the college towns makes the most sense,
Yeah.
right?
Exclude Madison, Milwaukee, but.
Yes.
Right? Well, even La Crosse is quite a bit bigger, right?
I'm from there, and I can't believe how expensive it's gotten. Like, it's considerably, the incomes are not higher than here, but the cost of living, to me, is much higher.
Anything else? Okay, well, go ahead.
Well, are we just taking questions on the whole chapter right now?
Yep.
Okay. As we get into page 64, housing strategies, low effort, medium effort, and high effort, I guess my general questions, that I'm just like thinking aloud when I look at that, and I don't think a lot of people are privy to the information. What are the most, because it talks about providing incentives, right? So what are the most legitimate incentives? How are incentives identified and allocated for a project? How does staff vet developers or reasonability of project proposals to discuss incentives? How many different sources of funding are there for incentives? What are the guidelines for how much to give? That type of, the mechanics of it, I think is not anywhere that I'm aware of. And I think at some point it's beneficial. I'm not saying it needs to go here, but I'm saying, is there a way to incorporate some of that? Because the comp plan in part is like, this is the city's philosophy toward development, right? This is how and why we give incentives, regardless of how deep you get in the weeds. This is how and why we do TIFs or TIDs, right? And that was a section that just kind of raised that in my mind, is how does that work?
A lot of people ask that, and I think there's a strong desire to get kind of like a synthesis statewide of like, what is a reasonable TIF ask relative to, what is, stuff like that. The data is really hard because every project is so different, because one site might have environmental cleanup, another one might have mixed use. It's so hard to compare.
It goes even deeper than that, because council makes those decisions. Right. We have an overarching kind of philosophy. Staff puts together proposals, and they are individual. Each one is supposed to be judged on its own merit, but council's philosophy may change over time too.
Right.
An example would be my predecessor had, there were opportunities where at least one that I know of got a very generous TIF incentive. And the council philosophy after that had been making sure that there's something left for the taxpayers, because they're using our roads, they're using our emergency services and things like that, and those have to be paid for.
Yeah.
So we will never do 100% TIF again right now.
There's actually been some very good policy books created by folks over in La Crosse regarding TIF incentive and how to evaluate adequately for the but-for argument, and ensuring that that there is a need for that incentive, and that there is also no detriment to the community at large too. So there are some guidebooks and references that we can make to.
But for has always been my favorite, because it's always been like, oh, really?
Yeah.
But anyway, what you said though, I don't mean my point to be reactive, but you said there's a philosophy. Is it written anywhere? Is it expressed formally somewhere where people can look at it and go, oh, I get why the city's doing that? And this is obviously, again, the ideal place to put it in some form. If you want to put anything, how you feel about putting together a TID, how do you feel about incentives? Not necessarily the mechanics, which are individually unique, right? But this is kind of why we do this. And we'll explain to you why when we get into the nuts and bolts of a particular, it's staff's job to tell you why it works for that and why we're doing it.
Yeah, and so the short answer to your question, Jeff, is no. It's not really written anywhere. We've discussed these things with council and kind of used those as guidelines. And let's say hypothetically that 20% TIF is the highest we'll go. If we feel it's worth discussing, we may propose to council, well, this particular project, we want to go to 22% or whatever it happens to be. So it's not a written in stone or on paper policy, more of that general philosophy, like I said. And if staff feels it's warranted to bring it to council for a decision, maybe not even a staff recommendation, we bring it to council, explain the situation, and then they choose.
It ends up being kind of a black box for the residents, though, sometimes. I think this is an opportunity to clarify that a little bit. And God bless Michael Ostrowski. We tried for years to get him to come over to the County Economic Development Committee and explain the TIF policy, especially when the TIF was going into the business park.
Well, apparently you need better weather and more barbecue.
Yeah.
It's a Texas guy.
So that's my kernel of thought on that goes way, way back.
So I think what we could do is probably put on paper like the general guidelines,
like best practices that are out there,
and then note that it's it's subject to the wishes of the council.
Yeah, River Falls does have its own TIF policy that's very prescriptive, but even then there was one that was like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and then they sort of went above and beyond for that one too, so they still do allow for some flexibility. But those books that Chris mentioned, was that from UWL or for the city, or who's that from?
Yeah, City of La Crosse.
Okay. I think maybe I can pull some bullet points from, some of these best practices that are out there and put them here.
I can give you the book if you want.
Yeah, perfect.
And then, I only bring up incentives because the word is mentioned here, and obviously the Economic Development Chapter is really the best place for a larger discussion of why the city feels the need to do these things, how as its approach to trying to attract or, grow development. I just mentioned it here because, the word is there. And
Yes.
just brought the questions up in my mind.
I like the fact that you brought up the but-for test too, because that is so broad and
Really?
applicable, right? But it's applicable.
Well, it is. A lot of times it's
Mike
but
is not
for.
going to build
If
this
we didn't do
project
it,
if you don't
it
give me
wouldn't
the
get built,
incentive.
but for.
Right? People have a tendency to think that, oh, the project's going to happen without incentive anyway.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if you don't provide the incentive, the next town over will, or the next town over there will, because it doesn't matter necessarily where I build it. It's what's going to be my biggest bang for the buck. So it's almost a delusion's a hard word, but to think that these things will happen if you just say no to incentive, because it's become so commonplace.
And this process is a great place for inject some transparency if it was so.
One thing I'll point out too, this list with the different levels of solutions, this is kind of a condensed version of what's in the Synergy housing study, so I can cross-reference it. I didn't want you guys to have this massive, massive housing chapter when you already have a housing study in place, because then I didn't want to unintentionally conflict with it. But I'll cross-reference it saying, for more details on these types of approaches, and because I put like case studies in there too.
And there's
see
some
the
things
Synergy
on here
study.
that are being done already,
Yes,
which is a good sign.
Yep.
Anything else, commissioners? Go ahead.
Page 66, goals, objectives, and policies, goal number 1. It says ensure the availability. Ensure sort of means that the city is responsible for making it happen. I was wondering if the city wanted to encourage the availability of a variety of housing styles, sizes, et cetera.
I think that word is safer.
I like it, yeah.
Objective 2, policy 2, the first word is consider, would pursue be a better word there. And that's just semantics on my part.
I think it's accurate. I mean,
It's more active language, and I'm always a fan of more active language when it comes to creating solutions.
and you've sat in on meetings with this Synergy housing study, so you've already been a part of regional stuff.
So I guess for policy 3, the first word is partner. Would collaborate work better? Partner kind of gets a very specific relationship almost, but
Yeah.
collaborate is let's get them together and try to do something good.
I like it.
I'm with you on that one, too.
Policy 4, the 1, 2, 3, the word growing. I don't know if we wanted to grow a base or cultivate a base of local small scale. I'm picking nits at that point, but
That one's a harsh one.
I know. I apologize. I'll light a candle to myself later.
So what are we doing with the word growing?
Develop.
I like cultivating, but
Okay.
if nobody else does,
Cultivating sounds fancier.
I think cultivate sounds like you can do it regardless of if you add people to it, because there's already people here capable of learning some of these skills.
Yeah.
So when you get older, you get paid by the syllable, not just the word. You aspire to that, I know. So, objective 4, policy 2, land use designations and zoning ordinances, I would say as needed. Otherwise, it sort of implies that you have to evaluate and change them all.
Oh. Yeah, I'll agree there.
I have nightmares about this stuff. Objective 5 says prevent housing insecurity. I don't think the city's going to be able to do that. They might be able to abate it, though.
Isn't abate and prevent the same thing?
Nope, it means to sort of get at, reduce, make it a little better. Policy number 1 on objective 5, instead of minimize homelessness by expanding, do we want to work to expand affordable housing options and not minimize homelessness? I mean, that might be our unstated goal, but it's a yardstick I don't think we need to be responsible for.
You talk about taking the word out.
Minimize homelessness by and replace it with work to expand affordable housing options by leveraging.
Why not just put expand affordable options?
There you go.
Get rid of minimize homeless by and just make it expand affordable housing options.
And that's what I had.
I'd just add objective 2 at the top, policies 4 and 5. I appreciated those. It's often gone unsaid, and I know you can't just favor local contractors and things.
No, wait, are you okay with policy 4 with cultivating?
I am. But, obviously that has a more immediate economic impact when we have local folks involved. And so where that's doable, I think that's good. And then obviously policy 5, we touched on, the zoning ordinances will have a great effect. So objective 3, I'm probably alone on this, but support an aging population's ability to successfully age within their homes and communities. I don't know if we want that.
Well, and I can speak from a little bit of experience, not personal, but family related.
I'll hold him for you.
Some of the aging population do not want to be in
I
their
understand.
homes. They want to be somewhere else. I don't want to shovel. I don't want to mow. I don't want to fix the leaky faucet. So some of the aging population chooses to downsize or take maintenance off.
I understand that, and I probably will be there at some point.
You will.
So policy 1, to me, is the key there, which is, we don't have a lot of options for our aging population. And so giving them options opens things up. I do understand policy 2 and doing that, but in terms of a strategy, that's going to be important for us. That's just me making that point. And then objective 4, policy 1, new affordable is an oxymoron. So I don't know if we were talking about subsidized housing there, or if we're talking about locate new housing or locating affordable housing, but there's nothing affordable about new.
Yeah, I was going to say the motivation behind that is like if you have like a light tech or something, people who are at the lower incomes are going to be less likely to have a car. So that's kind of what that was getting at, is if an opportunity does come up to do something more affordable, then proximity to stuff, where they could work or whatever, rather than somewhere where there's no access to transit or sidewalks or anything.
I guess in response to that, I think we could probably just insert an and, because there are housing projects that can be set aside, like Sam had mentioned, for housing tax credit projects, which will set aside some housing units specifically for folks that are rent restricted, that would be affordable to the community.
So like subsidized.
By state credits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we simply want to target affordable housing near jobs?
Yeah, and I was trying to figure out a better way to say that too, rather than locate new affordable housing,
That just says, do you think that's where it should go?
create.
Or try to make it go there?
Or
New just sort of gets in the way, I guess.
Sure.
Because the concept
cultivate.
is.
Cultivate.
Yes.
What does everybody think? Is there a better way to say that? Putting,
Just target it.
targeting affordable housing, not necessarily new.
Right.
Right.
New gets in the way.
Targeting affordable housing near.
The concept is you want a reasonably
Jobs.
priced places to live for people near employment.
Yeah.
And that's wordy, so.
And do we want to use public transportation rather than just transportation? My car is near me all the time. But I think what we're trying to get here is near public transportation.
Yeah. Well, it could be
Mass
transit, it could be a
transportation.
bike path, it could be
Right, yeah.
a
Yeah.
multitude of things. And I like taking new out of there because then it opens the door up for revitalizing stuff that's already
Right,
here too.
right. Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
It's
Mike, anything else?
encourage affordable housing instead of cultivate. Encourage.
I'm just kidding about the cultivation. I'm just giving Schuler a hard time.
Throw it out there.
But you understand, I mean, what we want to do is we want to have affordable housing near those
Where people
resources.
Can get
Jobs,
on the
transportation,
bus and
yeah,
go to work, or walk to
groceries.
work, or bike to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Work on that.
Yeah. Another thought going into that is, multifamily tends to be more affordable than single family. Usually that's a better fit for like a commercial corridor than, in an existing single family neighborhood. It just kind of naturally ends up to be that way.
Okay. Mr. Beacom, anything else?
General thoughts, but nothing within the report. I mean, the biggest thing that I hope we get out of this is we need to find more strategies for home ownership.
Yeah.
So we do have that imbalance, but home ownership keeps people in town. We have a big need there. I don't think we need any more apartment complexes. We're going to build some on the Shopko site because what else are you going to put there? But that's what we've been building, and we have a shortage of homes. I do think generationally in 20 years, we're going to see more homes on the market, but that's where we're missing rungs on the ladder, and we keep putting rungs in the same spot. So, my hope would be that this finds ways to encourage more homeownership, access to homeownership, and more middle-income housing to kind of stuff the deck in that section.
Would condos fit in there, as opposed to?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a ton of people. And I would say, duplexes to me are the closest thing to home ownership. And so R3, we had that project on Monday. I think that is something else that the city should incentivize or try to find more of. But condos, certainly.
Do you want to hear my thoughts on condos?
Sure, why not?
Everyone is asking me about them all the time because there's, especially for, empty nesters who downsize, and it's like hardly any of them have been built in 20 years because the lending is really tricky. You have to sell a certain number of units before you can even get financing to build them. The lenders themselves, it's like, well, this many units have to be in this price range or I'm not going to give you a loan for, so then people have trouble getting financing. Then there's a HOA on top of it where there's that collapse down in Florida where now there's rules about having to keep more in escrow for your HOA. That scares people off too because then their HOA payment is equal to their house payment. So I don't want to say they're impossible, but everything I read makes it sound like they're just not happening.
Well, and I think that's a big challenge for the city too, because what is the easy pickings here? People see the university and they all build the same things, they all present the same things, and we take the same things, but we keep missing what we need. So that's where I see the plan and future discussions on council saying, yeah, but we don't need more of that. We need this. So.
Yeah. And then like townhomes, for example, if they're 3 stories, then suddenly you might have to put in sprinklers or an elevator. The zoning code can enable, and then the building code can take it right away. So yeah, there's a lot of struggle. That's why it's hard to find people willing to build some of that stuff. But if we cultivate more local people who are willing to reinvest, maybe we can change things up.
I have a question for the commissioners. Has everybody been able to access the housing study? The place I found it was in the packet for the council on that meeting. I don't know if it had migrated over to the main website yet, but Chris, if people haven't, if you could maybe send everybody a PDF of that?
I'm actually halfway through drafting that email right now. So it'll be in your inbox.
Study.
I got it.
Are you talking about the city one or the Synergy one?
The Synergy one.
Okay. That's on our website too.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys.
Yeah.
And like to Mike's point, it's great to target what you need, but as you go through the study, you find that if you can't build anything without subsidies really that's under $200,000 to $300,000, and the thing that you can probably have a better chance at finding a rental point that people can access for the mid-income is apartments. That's, I guess, the rub for me, as I understand it through the study, is creating a price point that people can actually attain. It almost defaults to multifamily as opposed to individual homes. And that's part of the stuff I don't know is what's a reasonable way to subsidize construction or find a builder who can, you can't get around overhead, you can't get past materials costs, and then how do you actually make something like that achievable?
At the same time, I would argue that all the new development we have, when you put a whole bunch of $1,500 2-bedrooms on the market, people at $750 and $800 now can charge $900, and they're still way below.
Yeah.
So we've raised the lower end of the rents by just increasing the number of new units we've added to the market.
Okay.
And that was intentional, but that's been a result.
So solve that, will you?
Lacrosse. I was going to just quick mention Lacrosse Area Habitat for Humanity did it. I put a little bit of it in the manufactured housing about cross mods, which I'd never heard of until recently, and how they appraise like a stick built, and they're built to much higher energy efficiency, and they're more sturdy, but they're still on a chassis. It's like a weird hybrid thing.
And a permanent foundation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those seem to be one of those where it's a more, I wouldn't say affordable, but attainable as like a starter home, because starter homes haven't been built in how many decades now? And I feel like my house would have been a starter home, but the basement was finished, so now it's, the square footage is not really starter home square footage. But my first house was like an 800 square foot ranch from the 50s, which when's the last time we've been building stuff like that?
Yeah. Probably 1945 and 6.
Any other comments?
Maybe just one broad comment. I feel like maybe it was touched on specifically, I'm not locating it, but it's kind of alluded to, is that related to housing and lots of other economic development, Stevens Point is just one piece of the greater community, right? We know that there's certain types of housing or certain types of development, housing or other economic development, that is challenging here in Stevens Point. I mean, there's geographical challenges here for development that can be built in whole plover whiting, like in the other communities. And I think a hugely impactful part of broader housing strategy is working with those other communities to ensure that as a kind of, again, as an economic engine, this community is thinking about the greater needs and working together to say, well, this community is better positioned to work on this part of the missing chunk of housing, whereas our community is maybe we are well positioned to be the community that focuses on higher density apartments. But that does seem to be, it's something that's hugely challenging for the city and for the other municipalities probably feel similarly, where it's, I don't know, the mechanisms for collaboration don't seem evident, but even just having that as a more firm stated goal might be a good start.
The county did have a group that got together maybe just before COVID that was countywide on housing.
Well, and now it seems like a particularly good time for regional housing planning and, I guess, monitoring of housing construction to be, to become more evident between the work of Sam and Angel to produce the regional housing study. There's been a lot of spin-off conversations with neighboring villages and towns on housing that we're planning for and estimating based on housing study and our comp plan update. So that way we can be mindful of how much housing the city is building versus how much housing the village of Plover is building too. So it's happening, and we can probably find some ways to incorporate that into the plan.
And later in this process, we have that intergovernmental agreement chapter where we're planning to invite some of your neighbors to the meeting. And I've never even thought of bringing up housing at that, because that's more getting into boundaries and shared services and stuff like that. But maybe there's something we can learn at that meeting that we can throw back into the
we'll
housing
definitely
chapter.
be cultivating something.
I just wanted to circle back to ensure that maybe the sentiment was shared with the other commissioners from Commissioner Beacom about housing ownership and whether or not that's a goal. That was something that was shared pretty often within our surveys over the past couple of years about increasing home ownership. So just want to make sure you're all are okay with us either inserting another goal or a new objective for strategies for home ownership.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Cool. Anyone watching or listening outside of the live meeting, if you do have comments on this chapter, please direct them to our Community Development Department office. Okay, is that it? Then our agenda is exhausted, and we are adjourned at 7:32.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.